The wildfire roared through the hills like an unstoppable force, devouring everything in its path. The sky, once clear and blue, was now choked with thick smoke, turning day into an eerie, suffocating twilight. Ash fell like snow, coating the ground in a ghostly gray layer. The crackling of flames echoed through the abandoned streets of a small suburban neighborhood, and the air smelled of burning wood and melted plastic. Paramedic Daniel Carter wiped the sweat and soot from his brow as he scanned the smoldering wreckage around him. He and his partner, Megan Ruiz, had been working non-stop for hours, rescuing those they could, comforting those they couldn't. The devastation weighed heavy on his chest, but they had no time for grief. As Daniel pushed forward through the haze, something caught his eye. A figure, small and fragile, emerging from the thick smoke. He froze. "Megan!" he called, voice tight with urgency. "There's a kid." The boy, no older than 6 or 7, stood barefoot in the ash-covered street, wearing pajamas stained with soot. His wide, tear-streaked eyes darted around in confusion, and in his tiny hands, he clutched a worn leather leash. The strange part, there was no dog attached to it. Daniel approached slowly, kneeling to meet the child's gaze. "Hey there, buddy. Are you okay?" The boy didn't speak at first. He simply clung to the leash, his knuckles white, his lips trembling. "My dog," the boy finally whispered, his voice raw from smoke inhalation. "I was supposed to hold on to him." Daniel's heart clenched. "Where's your family? Where are your mom and dad?" The boy blinked, his innocent eyes brimming with confusion. "They told me to run. They said, 'Run and don't look back.' But I lost Max." Megan crouched beside Daniel, exchanging a worried glance. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said softly. "We'll find them. What's your name?" The boy hesitated, then muttered, "Tommy." Daniel's throat tightened. He gently placed a hand on Tommy's shoulder, feeling how small and fragile he was beneath the soot-streaked fabric. "Okay, Tommy," Daniel said gently. "We're going to get you somewhere safe. We'll look for Max too, I promise." But even as he said it, a gnawing unease crawled through his gut. The leash looked old, frayed at the edges. And there were no dog tracks in the ash. They brought Tommy back to the evacuation zone, where the Red Cross was setting up shelters for displaced families. The boy sat quietly on a cot, his fingers still wrapped tightly around the empty leash, eyes searching the crowd for a face he'd never see again. Daniel made calls, checking lists, desperate to find Tommy's parents among the rescued. Hours passed, but the answer finally came, delivered in a somber voice over his radio. The Thompsons didn't make it. House collapsed before units arrived. Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. He turned to Megan, who had been watching Tommy with sad eyes. "He doesn't know yet," she whispered. Daniel swallowed hard. He hated this part, the moment when they had to break something so terrible to someone so small. Taking a deep breath, he knelt beside Tommy, his voice trembling despite his best efforts. "Tommy," he said carefully, "we couldn't find your parents." The boy blinked, staring at Daniel in quiet confusion. "But they said we'd go home when this was over," he whispered. Daniel's chest ached. "I'm so sorry, buddy." Tommy's grip on the leash tightened, his tiny chest rising and falling quickly. "But Max, we have to find him." Megan knelt beside him, forcing a smile through the tears welling in her eyes. "We'll keep looking, okay? You're not alone." Tommy nodded slowly, his expression blank, as if his mind couldn't process the words. "I'll wait," he said softly, curling up on the cot, his arms wrapped around the empty leash like it was the only thing tethering him to the world. The next morning, the fire crews continued sifting through the rubble, searching for any remaining survivors or remains. It was a grim job, and Daniel did his best to stay busy. But then a firefighter approached him, holding something in his gloved hand. "You were looking for a dog, right?" the man asked. Daniel's heart leapt. "Yeah, a boy's dog, Max." The firefighter held out a charred, rusted dog collar. The tag, blackened by the flames, was barely legible, but Daniel could still make out the engraving. Max. His stomach dropped. He turned the collar over in his hand, his breath catching in his throat. It wasn't just the fire damage that made it look old. This collar had been through another fire, years ago. Where did you find this?" Daniel asked, his voice shaking. The firefighter scratched the back of his head, looking uneasy. Weird thing is, we found it in the remains of the Thompson house, but according to the records, their dog Max died in a fire about 5 years ago. Daniel stared at him, his blood running cold. That's not possible. Tommy was holding his leash. He said Max was with him. The firefighter shrugged. I don't know, man, but whatever that kid saw, it wasn't Max. Daniel found Tommy sitting alone, staring at the sunrise. The boy looked up as he approached, his eyes tired and far too old for his age. Hey, buddy, Daniel said gently. Can I sit? Tommy nodded. Daniel hesitated before handing him the collar. We found this. I'm sorry, Tommy. Max has been gone for a while. Tommy looked at the collar, turning it over in his hands before whispering, I know. Daniel froze. You knew? Tommy nodded, still staring down. Mom and Dad told me Max would keep me safe. He was there, but I let go. Daniel swallowed the lump in his throat, unsure of what to say. Tommy clutched the old collar to his chest, his lips trembling. Do you think he went back to them? Daniel blinked away the sting in his eyes and placed a gentle hand on Tommy's back. Yeah, kiddo, I think he did. And as the boy curled up again, his fingers still tightly wrapped around the worn leather, Daniel couldn't help but wonder, had the dog come back to guide him to safety? Or had he been leading Tommy somewhere else entirely? The fire had taken so much, but maybe, just maybe, some things refused to be left behind.